What's up everyone, it's OJ. Today we are going to talk about some balance changes, not only with Ash, but with Seth. How are you guys doing today?
Doing great, OJ. I'm really excited to be here. I know you are the person in the community who cares the absolute most about card interactions, and as I thought about the very detailed minutia of all of these balance changes and some future plans we have, I wanted to come on your channel and talk to you.
We were actually just on Ash's channel earlier too. If you guys haven't checked out part 1, make sure to check out his channel first.
Yeah, what's up, OJ? Thanks for having me. Glad to have another conversation with you guys. I'm excited about it.
What's big on my mind is 3M. You brought it up from 9 elixir to 10 elixir, but what that actually did was make it cost 10.6 elixir because you have to sit on it for about 1 second. Do you have any plans about the 3M right now? Because it seems if I get it in a draft challenge, I always give it away. If I get in the classic deck, it's like, oh no, I've lost, I have a dead card.
First, let me set the stage for what we were looking at, like the balance team was trying to face this sort of unsolvable problem. At least ever since I joined the team and have been looking at stats, Three Musketeers has had one of the highest win rates in the whole game. That deck has been rock solid. Three Musketeers, Elixir Collector, Minion Horde, Goblin Gang has just been sort of like this rock solid deck for months. What was crazy is it had this really high win rate, and yet no matter what we did, its win rate never changed. We would nerf support cards in the deck. I mean, we nerfed Elixir Collector, we nerfed Battle Ram, we nerfed Minion Horde, we nerfed Ice Golem, everything that we could possibly do to hit the support cards in the deck, and while those would move up and down, Three Musketeers was solid 59% win rate every single month. Top of that, whatever current evolution of Three Musketeers was around was one of the top 3 decks in the meta. If you sort of looked at the whatever form, the 10,000 foot view of sort of rock, paper, scissors, the 3 biggest, most common decks that you had to count for when you were playing, Three Musketeers was almost always one of those decks. Even if you switched certain support cards in the deck, it would just evolve into something different. I mean, we saw the Barbarian Hut, Flying Machine versions of Three Musketeers. We saw Fast Cycle versions. We saw Giant Battle Ram Three Musketeers. Just so many different variants on the deck that it was very hard to balance this card. Now, even worse than that, we are seeing player data, subjective feedback that Three Musketeers is one of the most frustrating cards to deal with. Now, I think if you're a pro player and you're sort of building for a specific meta, then you can plan on it. But for people at large, for most people playing the game, Three Musketeers was very constricting because you have to sort of play 2 fireballs in your deck, some way to answer the Musketeers and also hit the Elixir Collector, or else most people playing the game would just hack it up and lose. We knew we had to do something, and the problem was that the 2 main solutions we faced was deploy time and raising their cost to 10. Problem with deploy time is there's a concern that it might actually buff them because the more time you have behind the King Tower, you can save up more elixir to build a bigger push. You at least know that going to 10 elixir is a nerf. You can
Death sentence.
Well, I didn't think it was going to be a death sentence. Yes, it's 10.3 or 10.6 elixir, depending on whether it's single or double elixir time. You are still getting 12 elixir worth of troops, and part of the reason we buffed the Musketeer as well was to ensure that things like the double Musketeer side were much stronger than they were before. Honestly, if Three Musketeers settles in the mid 40% win rate, I would be very happy with that because I think it's a deck that deserves to exist. We don't want to kill anyone's favorite deck.
Where is it right now?
It's in like the 30%. I mean, of course, it changes day by day.
Yeah.
I do think that may recover a little bit because, of course, everyone thinks Three Musketeers is so bad that you get a disproportionate amount of people abandoning the deck. Now, maybe some of those people will come back or try it or find out that it's okay. The larger problem is that it doesn't feel very fun or intuitive to be forced to leak elixir every time you play the card. This wasn't something that we were unaware of. Of course, we knew you would leak elixir. I personally at least justified it as like, well, 10.3 is still a good deal for 12 elixir worth of troops. But in practice, it's just, we shouldn't have cards that purposely make you feel bad, right? And we discussed the 11th elixir coming back, which for longtime players, there was a time where the elixir bar would keep ticking past 10 elixir up to like 10.99. You could play cards very late and already have some elixir regenerated when you did that. We talked about maybe bringing that back, but decided against it for a variety of reasons. That means that, okay, well, if Three Musketeers are unacceptably weak, we know 10 elixir doesn't work, then that means at some point we need to bring Three Musketeers back to 9 elixir. But we cannot do that today because we know exactly what will happen. They'll be one of the strongest, if not the very strongest deck in the game.
It really did affect the meta with everything, how like 3M, people were playing around 3M to get Fireball, to get arrows, to get Miner to address the Elixir Collectors. I do like the meta how it is right now. I do miss them though, so it's kind of like on both ends. I don't know where to stand right now.
You're right that the meta has actually been very diverse. It's actually been one of the most diverse metas can remember, and part of the reason why is that Three Musketeers constricted a lot of deck building choices. It was really hard to play a deck that, for example, only ran 1 small spell because you just would naturally not have an answer for the splitting Three Musketeers, or you would just get run away by elixir pumps. So 10 elixir is definitely not ideal. I don't want to imply that we are happy with how the card is, but in the short term, it's nice to see what happens when they don't exist, and more importantly, it gives us balance changes, time with balance changes to change cards around that will be good against Three Musketeers. Know that they're balanced against everything else, and then bring Three Musketeers back back into the metagame. Let me give you some examples just from this month, things that set that up. Bomb Tower will counter the 2 Musketeer side. You take a little bit of damage, but I mean, by and large, it's going to counter it for only 4 elixir. Even if they put something like Ice Golem. Barbarians. Now, again, I said on Clash with Ash's channel, I think Barbarians are going to be very good. A balanced Barbarians should be able to hit the 2 Musketeer side, even again with an Ice Golem or Knight or Battle Ram, and be very effective against it. Once we get Barbs into a balanced state where we feel like both the Battle Ram card and the Barbarian squad are balanced, that should be an effective counter to the 2 Musketeer side. Also, as an effect of the Barbarians change, Battle Ram will no longer fully block the Musketeers from lightning, which, as I'm sure you both know, is one of the most frustrating things to have happen when you play against a 3 Musketeers deck. Is they spend 9 elixir, they get 12 elixir worth of troops, then you go to spend 6 elixir and they counter all of it, all 6 of it, with a 4-cost card. That's a nightmare. You're so far behind an elixir, and you were punished for basically playing a card that you knew was good. Now Battle Ram will hit the tower, the ram, and 1 Musketeer, but leave the 2 Barbarians and the last Musketeer, which I think is a much better exchange for the person playing Lightning. Their goal was to kill one of those Musketeers.
Seth, can I ask you one real quick thing? And it's a little bit of a sidestep. You mentioned the Bomb Tower being a viable counter to 2 Musketeers. In your mind right now, do you think that the Bomb Tower will kind of buck the trend of all defensive units and be a structure that you want to play in the middle of the lane now? Like you would have to counter 2 Musketeers?
The original buff we were going to give to Bomb Tower was actually just going to be a health buff. When we played around with different options, try out a couple different things, the thing that was the most exciting about adding death damage was that it encouraged you to play Bomb Tower in lane, which is of course different from how you play every other defensive build. Most every defensive building involves dragging something to the middle, milking the tower for as much damage as you can, making the path from bridge to tower as long as possible. But with Bomb Tower, we thought we could use this death damage, and the death damage is substantial. It's more than a balloon's death damage, to encourage you to play a building in lane and hopefully stop things like bridge spam. I mean, it was designed specifically with the death damage to be effective against Bandit, Battle Ram, Ghost, the sort of cards that we expect that you play at the bridge and try to go straight for the tower. You don't have to try to pull them away now. You can just put Bomb Tower as a speed bump. Whether or not this will be enough, that's for the players to decide and for me to react to. Yes, the death damage was something that we did because it encouraged you to play the card in lane.
Interesting. Cool.
Seth, you've done a lot of things to prep for the future of 3M. You've nerfed the Battle Ram, so it's not going to be lightning rodded. You've added some counters. Barbarians will counter it. You've made the Bomb Tower be able to counter 1 lane. But what about the Barbarians? What if they're Fireball Bait? What if they make the 3M stronger?
You're right that Barbarians are Fireball Bait, but I'm not actually worried about how they'll interact with 3 Musketeers, because even if 3 Musketeers was back to 9 elixir, that deck isn't really looking for a 5-cost melee attacker. They want something a bit cheaper, they can cycle quicker. There are many cards that I think really need a friend. So we have Royal Hogs, Magic Archer, Zappies. 3 cards that I think...
And the Flying Machine.
And the Flying Machine. Flying Machine's pretty good already. And actually, Flying Machine has been multiple times on the maybe nerf list. And
yeah, I saw you, Seth, on Reddit say that you're surprised that people aren't more kind of up in arms about Flying Machine being too strong.
Well, it's more that if you follow the stat websites, is that Flying Machine is one of the highest win rates in challenges. It's a very strong card. It's used very consistently. And at least when I was watching the Red Bull MEO, which is when I tweeted that, it seemed to be one of the most impactful cards and one of the most commonly played cards in a lot of these decks. It wasn't so much that it was like, this card's way crazy overpowered. It's more that given how often you see it, given how impactful it felt in the matchups, given that its stats are shown publicly as being very good, I'm just surprised that nobody ever, for any reason, has asked me to nerf that card, given how often you get all sorts of requests for a wide variety.
I think the reason is because it's not frustrating to play against. It's like, I see it, if this is threatening, I need to fireball it now. You fireball it, it's gone. And because of the counterplays of that, it's not frustrating to play against. Maybe that's one of the reasons why.
There's 2 things I want to expand on that I think you made really, really good points. One is, if you can counter it, it doesn't feel that frustrating. Because you can fireball the Barbarians, hopefully they don't feel that frustrating. But I think they're going to be very good, because a 25% damage increase is huge. Part of the reason why Flying Machine is so good is because, yeah, you can say, well, yeah, just fireball it. But the whole point of those decks are that you don't have a fireball for everything. And if you don't have a fireball for Flying Machine, it can get a ton of value just by sitting in the middle of the river, picking things off on both lanes.
Yeah.
That's really good, right? So by that same merit, they're not always going to have a fireball for your Barbarians. And that's true now. People play Barbarians right now. Do they fireball them every single time? No, of course not. Do they poison them every time? No, of course not. So every time that doesn't happen, those barbs are going to be significantly better. And what that does is it gives decks that include Royal Hog, Zappies, Magic Archer, and Flying Machine. Those decks lacked a strong melee defender that fit the gimmick they were trying to do. Some of them played Minion Horde, but Minion Horde dies not only to arrows, but to things like Zap plus an Ice Spirit or an Ice Golem plus everything. There's so many like small interactions that can wipe that out. Meanwhile, they're not blocking like a Prince or a Lumberjack from getting to the tower. Barbarians are going to do that. They're going to be a big melee defender, and if they had already used Fireball on your Magic Archer, on your Flying Machine, on your Royal Hog's attack, they're not going to have the Fireball for those Barbarians. On the reverse side, if they do Fireball your Barbarians, they're going to struggle to defend your Royal Hog. So it's up to the opponent to figure out how to deal with all these different cards. I think what Barbarians will do will open up a new deck involving 4 to 5 card Fireball.
I mean, imagine Barbarians, Magic Archer, Flying Machine, Royal Hogs, cycle cards, whatever, spells and stuff. That could actually be viable.
Yeah, and hopefully saving grace there is that the deck will not be that fast cycling. All the cards kind of cost 4 or 5. The person with Fireball should actually be able to cycle it quicker than whatever the specific Fireball bait thing you're worried about. So if you decide, for example, I'm going to use Baby Dragon on defense against Royal Hogs so I can Fireball the Barbarians when I'm on offense, you should be able to get back to your Fireball faster than the Fireball bait deck should be able to get back to their cards, because every single card they play is like a 4 or 5 cost.
Makes sense to me. It'll be interesting to see, and especially if people end up splitting Barbarians and using them that way too. I think they could provide value in a number of different ways. I'm curious to see what people will do with Barbarians.
Yeah, and I want to say that I think that they're going to end up being pretty good. They're certainly, I think, going to be an improvement over their current state. I'm surprised to see people think that they're going to be worse, because generally speaking, if you Fireball Barbarians now, they're pretty much dead afterwards, because there's something behind your tank. Even the Hog Riders have like Spear Goblins behind them, so you Fireball the Barbarians and then the things die pretty shortly after. I think they're certainly going to be an improvement after this update, and in fact, we pushed them about as far as we can reasonably go. Fireball does 572 damage, the Bards will have 555 health. It's pretty close to 1-to-1. I do think there is a possibility, if we need to, we can lower Barb's health further. For example, if Barbarian Barrel is still very strong and very widely used, if Battle Ram is still the #1 win condition in competitive play, and if the Barbarian squad proves to be a bit too strong, we do have more room to lower their health. So I think that's a space that we've given ourselves, but we did want to put it as close to the Fireball damage as possible to push that archetype and really see if Barbs can be balanced with as much damage and health as they're going to have, partially because they can counter 3 Musketeers and other incoming attacks.
That's really interesting how you've done all of these things, and I'm kind of excited to see what the future holds for everything. So I gotta ask you, Seth, for the Barbarians, it's a massive change. You brought down the health by 13%, but you added 1 Barbarian, effectively increasing its damage by 25%. What was the whole reason for all of that?
There's a lot of reasons. One of the things that really started jogging in my brain was actually considering how the cards intuitively feel. Of course, you want the things to be balanced, but it's important that everything just makes sense when you're playing. When you play Clash of Clans, Barbarians are not tanky troops. I mean, they're complete cannon fodder. They just get crushed like by everything. So it was very weird that in Clash Royale, which of course shares the same universe, that the Barbarians would survive Fireball and have more health than armored Musketeers, Wizards, troops that are traditionally stronger in Clash of Clans than the Barbarians. There was also an issue where Barbarians are very close to Royal Recruits. Barbarians had 636 health, Royal Recruits 640, 639, but they have a shield. Slightly more because of the shield absorbing some. But either way, they're incredibly similar troops, but of course they don't look similar. One's in a loincloth with no armor, the other's armored up, got a big old shield in front of them. So we wanted to look into making Barbarians squishier than our solo troop, the Wizards and Musketeers that have like 598 health at tournament cap. The idea was, how can we make them die to Fireball? Well, Fireball does 572, so let's put their health below Fireball. We started at 570, 5 whatever, and settled on 555, which is, we're pushing it there. We're hoping that the card feels balanced. Because you can counter it with Fireball, it seems fair, but I do think they're going to be very good. The reason why is that we wanted it to feel intuitive, and it had a lot of great ripple effects, including making Battle Ram no longer a lightning rod for 3 Musketeers, including nerfing Barbarian Barrel and Battle Ram, 2 cards that also needed a bit of a haircut, and providing standard Barbarian squad as a Fireball bait melee defender that can help cards like Royal Hogs, Zappies, and Magic Archer find a home in the meta.
That's really cool. From Clash of Clans, it makes so much sense when you mention that immediately. It's clicked. They're not a tank unit. They're just kind of single troops. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, that's the same reason we decided to go with the Bomb Tower. We mentioned that we decided the Bomb Tower was because it would block a single lane interaction, but the reason why we tried that death damage is because that's what it does in Clash of Clans. That's death damage, so trying to make the universes as close as possible.
Next up, Baby Dragon Rage. I noticed that on the Rascals was a card that you touched in the last balance change. It's another 5 elixir common, similar to Barbarians. I'm wondering what the intention behind the making the girl Rascals spawn before the boy Rascal. Do you think that will have a dramatic impact on the strength of the card, Seth?
I don't think it'll have a dramatic impact, but I do think it'll have a bit more of a skill cap because you have to play them a bit more predictively. And here's sort of the logic behind it. Mortar Bait is a very controversial deck that comes up all the time.
It is.
And I don't think that Mortar Bait in particular is overwhelmingly strong, but I do think that bait in general is something we see a lot of. Pretty much every deck tries to, for example, bait out your zap or log, even with just a few cards. And I think part of the reason why is that swarm cards sort of have this inherent advantage. The trade-off with swarm cards is you're going to get more total stats and more total damage than similarly priced single unit, but the trade-off is that you will lose damage output as the troops die. So each time a goblin goes down, Goblin Gang does less damage, whereas Mini P.E.K.K.A is doing the full amount of damage until it dies. Now the problem is that because they all spawn at the exact same time, they get to deal that damage up front very quickly. Bats immediately attack with 5x their damage, and that means that even if you react pretty quickly, they still did get a lot of upfront damage and are usually worth it, stopping an attack or whatever else they're doing. The goal with the staggered deploy for swarm troops is to require you to place them a little bit earlier. You have to be a little bit more predictive with it. And especially in the example of Mortar Bait with Rascals, you could play the Mortar and almost instantly play the Rascals directly in front, and it was sort of an always strong predictive play because the boy would land first, absorb all the shots, girls are shooting, the Mortar shooting, all that. So this requires you to play Rascals a little bit more preemptively, to be a little bit ahead of the game on defense. But to be fair, the difference between their old version and their new version is 0.3 seconds. So I don't think a 1/3 of a second slower deploy is going to make like a massive difference.
For very specific interaction, I'm thinking like a lumberjack. Before you would put down Rascal directly on top of a lumberjack for whatever reason, and the lumberjack's gonna lock onto the boy Rascal. But now it's gonna go chop chop and take out the girl Rascals immediately. So how do you feel about that kind of interaction?
I think those sort of changes are actually good for the skill cap and the interaction of the card. For example, Rascals are still going to be incredibly good on defense because you can play them just a few tiles further back and make sure that the boy is always going to land. Again, it's only 1/3 of a second. It's not going to be a massive change for most people. But on offense, if they're trying to play it or if you're trying to react really quickly to what they just played, being able to drop stuff behind and kill the girls a little bit quicker or have the girls be vulnerable when they come down in the thick of battle, I think adds to the skill cap of that card. Rascals actually has one of the higher win rates, especially of mini tanks and cards like that. I think that was one that did maybe need a little bit of a haircut because it was so strong and so versatile for its cost. And I think what it does now is it forces you to think about where the placement is going to be and make sure that the girls land safely. Yeah, you're right. Like if something is there looking for a target and you play the Rascals first, like a wizard, the wizard's going to see the first girl, just shoot her instantly, and then the boy's going to land. So you have to play them far enough back that the boy can actually land.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. My final question for you, Seth, was just speaking, take a step back from all these individual cards we're talking about and just look overall at the game 3+ years into the history of the game. In your mind, is there ever going to be a day where there's different competitive modes? We see that a little bit in the mini collection game mode and in the classic and the modern game modes, but do you think there will be different competitive standards? I know you're a big Magic the Gathering guy, as was I in the past. Do you see a future like that where there's different cards that kind of cycle in and out of competitive formats, or do you have a plan at all about that?
On the big picture, when you think of games, yeah, like Magic the Gathering, they ban cards. They say, as time goes on, these old cards are banned. I can say very clearly, we had no plans, no intention. There is nothing anywhere decided, written, wanted to do that we would ban existing cards in the game. It's not like a traditional card game. You spend a lot of time leveling up your favorite cards, and to have them just go away, be deleted from the game would be
not
backbreaking.
Cool.
Right, not cool. Yeah. However, we do have things like mini collection mode, which we just introduced, to challenge your deck building skills and make you deal with a wider range of cards and sort of get you out of your comfort zone, get you out of playing that same exact 8-card deck that you've been playing for thousands of games. Try something else, very similar to the Clan War modes. Draft is another thing that we really like and want to keep improving. We'd like to do improvements to the existing draft mode and also new variations of draft modes that maybe some are a little bit more competitive. Like I really like the current draft mode as like a very fun casual draft, but CRL players sort of rightfully aren't interested in playing it at the competitive level. But there are definitely card games that have competitive drafting modes where it's considered a very skillful format. So if we can come up with what competitive draft looks like, then that could also be a new mode that comes out in the future. In last week's Reddit post, What Are We Up To?, Drew mentioned that we had talked about an idea of what if you had a mega deck, a really big deck. How would the game be different? Would that be fun? So yes, like we're always thinking about more ways for you to to use your cards, play in different game mode formats. And I was just talking about big picture stuff like draft and mini collection. Of course, there's always going to be more of the kind of smaller, wacky game modes like Hog Race and other ideas.
You really mentioned how the mini collection improvements and all these things. I think I have the most fun playing the game when I'm playing different decks. So the mini collection global tournaments were a super cool idea, obviously inspired by the war deck building stuff, to play out of my own comfort zone, to play different archetypes. My biggest thing and my final question is, will you guys be adding more deck slots? I'm literally sitting on the same 5 decks for the past year because I'm too lazy, and I kind of have like a hoarder mentality where these are my babies. I can't delete them. Please, are you going to add any more deck slots?
I feel your pain. I'm the same way, OJ. It's like everything. I have like some decks I just can't move. So on the big picture scale, for most players just stick to the same 1 or 2 decks. The deck slot problem is definitely something that affects a pretty small minority of players, although it is important. We have looked at changing the UI in the past, but it is harder than it sounds because there are a lot of places where that UI shows up. Not the deck building one, but the deck selection one, the like pick 1 through 5. So it's not just changing it, for example, on the deck building screen alone, it's changing every single screen where you ever pick or build a deck. It's a bit of a bigger task, but we have talked about it. There's been a few ways we've talked about doing it. Can't spoil anything about it. It would not shock me if extra deck slots came at some point. I just cannot predict or promise when that is. But it's something that, of course, the more you play the game, the more you want them.
That's gonna wrap it up for this video. I want to thank you guys again for joining the channel. Clash with Ash, as always, you have amazing questions, and Seth, you have such great insight into all of these balances. It's such a refreshing view to hear what your thoughts and everything is. Ultimately, you log on, you check news morale, you check the stats, and it's like, Barbarians minus 13% health. What? But like to hear like your actual thoughts, and there's actual logic behind all of these things, and it's a long roadmap that you have planned out. It's just so cool to hear that. So thank you guys again. If you have any final words, I'd love to hear it.
I guess that's it for me. Thanks for having me on, OJ. I really appreciate coming on here, and thanks again, Seth, for making yourself available like this. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm really glad to talk to both of you. You've both done so much for the Clash Royale community that when I was sort of thinking about who I'd want to have this conversation with, you were the first 2 to jump to mind. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, that's awesome. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching.